Hi guys, this is Christine and welcome to my YouTube channel. I have wanted to do this video for such a long time, but anything that requires that you get out of your shell and into a vulnerable place requires some boldness. And I have been daring to be bold and tell my story. Actually, you know what? I have been watching Jeremy Cowart's story video over and over, and I'm like, if he can do this, I can do this too. Because I've shared my story, but I've been sharing it bits and pieces. But today what I want to do is just really focus on the really key milestones or key areas that have helped shape who I am and have really molded me really throughout the years. And so if anyone knows me, and you know that from when I was a little child, I was really shy. I mean, I was so shy to the point where right now, looking back, that shyness was almost like very dark. Like it was a really dark place of my life, because in that shyness I was covering up a lot of hurt. And I would have loved to be more outgoing, more extroverted, but I was very introverted just because I experienced so much bullying as a child. And I was bullied for the color of my skin, and it was really hard going to school, and kids could be very mean. They would make remarks that were very hurtful, and that really just at the end of the day I absolutely hated school. And I believe that also impacted my overall performance. My grades weren't good at all in school. I mean, the only good grades that I really think that came out of my time in school was when it came to essay writing, because I loved writing so much. It was my refuge place. It was the place where I could retrieve and I could become whoever I wanted to be. I could be so beautiful in that fictional world that I created. And so writing became refuge, writing became love, writing became who I wanted to be full-time. Like if I was given an opportunity to live in this fictional world that I created for myself, I would take you up on that offer, because the real world was so cruel, and so my grades weren't good, but tell me to write your story, I could write you a story. Tell me to put myself in any situation, I could come up with any scenario and build a story out of that. And that was my way of coping, and I grew up with beautiful, wonderful friends who were asked out to go on dates. They had boyfriends. I never had any of that, and I lived my life feeling so ugly. And many times I asked God, why did you create me so ugly? Why couldn't you make me just a little bit beautiful, just enough for the world to accept me, so that I don't have to stand out anytime I go anywhere? I hated public speaking. I had the fear of crowds in me, because every time I stood up in school to speak or something, someone would just make some really mean remark that would really make me feel like I wish the world would just open up and I would just sink in it. And so I learned to love this fictional world, and I found myself writing. I would write for so long. I've never been published, but I found myself writing books from a very young age, and that was really refuge to me. And what else? And so what, my dad was dark-skinned as well, and when I was around 18 years old, my dad was shot and killed in front of my sister, who was at that time 5 years old. And it was a very stressful time in all our lives, in our family, because for me, my dad was like my rock. My dad was like my everything, because he was dark-skinned like me, and yet he loved people and people loved him. So every time I looked at my dad, I saw a representation of who I could one day become. And he just loved himself in the skin that he was in so much, and I don't think it ever fazed him that he was dark, and that, you know, and I don't think he ever knew that his child, his daughter, was struggling and was being bullied for the color of her skin. And he just represented so much love, genuine love, unconditional love, and he taught me from such a young age how to love people just by his actions. And so, having been bullied, I became very sensitive to how people feel. I always wanted to make people feel welcomed, and to love themselves. And it's almost to a point where I was giving them what I wish the world would give me back. And so I grew to be a very sensitive person, very compassionate person, and I found myself at a very young age being ached by the troubles of this world. If I saw someone suffering, don't have a place to live, or struggling to get food or anything like that, even though I was so young back then and I didn't seem to have the capability of helping them, they troubled me. I mean, they really troubled me so much. And so I had a real deep compassion for mankind. And when my dad died, it kind of shut down the hopes that I had for myself, that I could one day be somebody like he was. My dad worked in the judiciary as a magistrate, and he was well loved in his circle of friends and even at work, and very well respected. And he just owned who he was. I never saw my dad doubt or even question how people looked at him. He just really just blended in, and that's what I always wanted, was to just blend into life, because it seemed to me that everywhere I went, people just like stare at me like some figure of strangeness that they had never seen. And me having this script playing over and over in my head that I was ugly made it seem so hard to face people. And so fast forward, when I eventually became pregnant with my first child, my fear was always having a girl, because having a girl for me represented the possibility of having an ugly child. For some weird reason, I actually thought that if I had a boy, that boy would be handsome, and this gene, if it is a gene that was passed down of ugliness on me, would not be passed down to a boy, but it could easily be passed down to a girl. And so while I wanted to have girls because I loved doing girly stuff, I had a big fear of having girls, for the fear that they might turn out to look like I am, and then the world might treat them like they've treated me, and then my kids might only find the beauty in themselves, and they might even, I was so afraid that my kids would even want to commit suicide, because many times I wanted to just end it, you know, for myself, because I just felt so ugly. And so when I had my child, my first child, I was so scared. I was so scared. And when she was born, the first thing I asked the nurses, does she have hair? For me, hair was enough to ask. I mean, if she had hair, I was happy. I was afraid to ask, how does she look? That was the big question that I really wanted to ask, is how does she look? And before I asked that question, she had answered, yes, she has hair, and she had put my child on my hands. And I was then forced to look at her, and when I looked at her, she was beautiful. I was so surprised that I had a beautiful child. I could not believe. She looked nothing like me, absolutely nothing like me, and for me that represented beauty. And then I told God, my greatest fear now was, what if she wakes up tomorrow? What if I wake up tomorrow or the next day or a few months later and she turns ugly, you know? She's just so young. All kids are beautiful when they're born, yeah? And so, yeah, that was my fear. Every time I would wake up in the morning, I'd take a good look at her to make sure that she's not turning ugly, you know? And it was really sad. And then a year later, I got pregnant again, and this time I'm like, oh my goodness, God, you have to give me a boy, because I know if it is a girl, for sure I cannot get lucky twice. So this other one, if she's a girl, then I am doomed. She's not gonna be beautiful. And at that time, God had started working on me slowly but slowly, and just really opening my eyes to the beauty that He had created in me. although I was still not embracing it yet. So going through another pregnancy and being told that I'm having another girl, I was terrified of going into labor, because going into labor meant that I would be forced to look at the child and face the child. And so when I eventually went on labor and then they handed me my daughter, I was so scared of looking at her, of struggling to love her. And because if I did not find the beauty in myself, that means I was gonna struggle to love my child. And when I looked at my daughter, she was the most precious thing ever. I was so happy. I was like, God, thank you so much. I mean, at that point I almost felt like, God, you've really done good by me. You've really helped me, because the worst thing I wanted to go through in life is to watch my kids being teased and feeling bad about themselves and even wanted to commit suicide, because it's only me who could see the beauty in them. I convinced myself that I'm the only one. If they're ugly, then the world will see ugly, and I'm the only one who will see beauty. And so I watched my kids grow up and grow into these beautiful, lovely women. And in fact, many people found it so hard to differentiate them because they look so alike. And so many times, up till today, my daughters are 12 and 13. They're 12 and 13 now, but they're going to be 13 and 14 this year. I still stare at them many times, and they might not even have an idea why I'm staring at them, but I'm just looking at them and saying, wow, you guys are beautiful. And over the years, God has really worked on me and taught me to really embrace the beauty that He's given me. He made me see that my kids are a product of myself, and if I can find the beauty in my children, that means I can find the beauty in myself. And slowly by slowly, I've started looking at my children and also looking at myself in the lenses that God looks at me, and just seeing the beauty that I hold inside of me. But it wasn't easy, it's not been easy. Many times people compliment me and I still struggle with accepting their compliments, because I really can't believe that they find any beauty in me. But I must say that I've come a very long way. God has been faithful, and I've been able to overcome a lot of my fears as far as who I am and where I am, and I can now face a crowd of people and have a little bit of confidence that I am okay just the way I am. And if God loves me and my children love me, I mean, that's all that matters to me. And so fast forward into having children, and then now what? So you've had children. I've always wanted to have children, but then I always have this ache for giving back, and I always had this ache of doing more. And so my children were born in Minnesota, and God dared me to pack up and leave Minnesota and move to California. And I told God, I'll move on one condition, and the one condition is that you will give me a job before I move. And so when we were moving here, I had secured at least 3 jobs. And so I felt good about the move. But until we arrived here, that's when I realized that God had a bigger plan. I mean, my plan was to move here and just enjoy the weather, and God's plan was to unveil purpose in me. And I had prayed before moving that God would unveil my purpose, because I know He had created me for something, that if I could overcome all those fears of ugliness and the thoughts of suicide and just the fear of even having a child and having beautiful children, if I could overcome that, and if God could help me do all that, then there is a purpose for my life. I was born and created for something bigger than me, bigger than my story at the time. And so God brought me to California and unveiled purpose. As soon as we arrived here, all the jobs that were promising just failed, and before you know it, we found ourselves homeless. And when I say homeless, we were utterly homeless out on the streets. And so we were seeking shelter from shelter to shelter, and in that process I was able to see deep darkness. I was able to see people in their most vulnerable state, and in their most poorest state, and in their most needy self. And at that same moment, as I was going through that, it's so funny, God is just God is has a sense of humor. Let's start from there. But also, God is one that I have noticed He does the most work in you when your resources are very limited, you know. And so at that moment, God, I remember having this encounter with God, and He encouraged me to start blogging. And when He gave me the word to blog, I had no idea what a blog was. So I remember waking up the next day and Googling what is a blog. All I know, I woke up with the word blog and I knew I needed to blog. And so when I Googled, I found out that a blog is a place where you write. And I was like, oh, bingo, God, you just know me too well. I love writing. And so, and I tell you, God helped me build my very first blog. My blog is called Mothers with a Dream for Christ, and it's the number 4, and I'll put a link on it down below. But God helped me build it in the first phase of it, and I started blogging and just encouraging people. And in the same and that was when we were homeless, by the way, so I would have to hook on do the blogging in the library or somewhere where I could get internet. And also too, God called me at that time to start ministering and feeding the homeless, and I was myself homeless at the time. So when we would go feed the homeless, it's so funny, then I would tell them what I'm going through and they would not believe it. They could not understand how someone is going through what they're going through and helping them at the same time. But I would encourage them to just hold on, to be strong, and to continue to believe and never give up. And as I would encourage them, that would also be like ministry to myself, because there were some days that were so difficult. I remember days when I had to wait for my kids to eat and then pray that they would have any leftovers, and then I would have to eat that leftover with them. And it was a very humbling experience, but God gave me peace during that time. I never once felt like God had abandoned me or God was, punishing us for anything. I felt a love like no other. I felt His presence much closer to me than I have ever felt in my whole life. And as I was obedient to Him, He kept increasing and promoting us to a higher level. So we went from seeking shelter in an emergency shelter and then seeking shelter in a motel. So I got to witness the hundreds and hundreds of families who call motel rooms, and these are not comfortable motel rooms. These are really, I remember our motel room was so dirty and it smelled of smoke. It was in a state that is not good, and there were so many other homeless families seeking shelter in that same motel room in a very dingy part of town too. And so God exposed me to that, and then before you know it, we were accepted in a transitional home. And then within a year of being accepted to the transitional home, we were able to secure our own apartment, and God was also able to secure a good job for me, and He kept continuing to bless us. And I had already told God that as you get us out of this, we'll continue to give back. And so I started, we started doing the homeless feeding. And I remember I was working in LA at the time, so I would take the train, and every time I arrived LA, I would witness a level of poverty much like no other. Orange County has the poverty and the homeless situation here as well, but in Los Angeles, it's in a big and grandeur state. And so God put it in my heart every time I would make a sandwich for myself that I would pack a sandwich for someone who was homeless. And so I would pack about 2 or 3 sandwiches, and as I arrived Los Angeles to work, I would meet them as I walked to my building for work, and I would just hand them sandwiches. It was a great way to give back because my schedule then was really tight. And also at the time, we started sponsoring 2 children with Compassion International. So we have our sponsor child from Kenya, a boy, James, and then we have another boy, Atul, from India. And so we watched them grow into such wonderful, beautiful, wonderful men of God. And now they're still getting into their teenagers, but they're beautiful. And where we started off with them is nowhere where they are right now. They've been such a blessing to us. They let us keep us motivated, and it's just been such a great impact. And also to working with international justice mission, like, we'd support them financially, and we'd support various organizations. Our heart was just driven to give, and it is still driven to give. And so fast forward to 2016, God called me to a deeper level of walking in where I would trust him to do something that I was so afraid to do. That is to really expand the homeless ministry and start really, feeding and clothing the homeless in a much larger scale. And I was so scared. I said, God, I need a husband to do this. I need a man with me. I'm gonna go into this place where there are hundreds upon hundreds of homeless people. Many of them have mental health issues, and their state of living is just really, really dire. And that really scared the living daylights out of me, to be honest. But I knew that I needed to do it, and I also knew that God had given me the boldness, and he had prepared me for such a time as this. So this year I told my daughters, ask your friends if they want to come with us to feed the homeless. And I asked my friends too. And before you know it, my friends came together, kids' friends came together, and we've been doing this, and we are loving it. And we've seen hundreds upon hundreds of people fed and clothed and loved upon. And every time I say, God, where are we going to get the money or the food for the next feeding? He always provides. Someone will text me and say, hey, I want to come. It's just been seeing God in a different state. And it has required a lot of trusting him for provisions, but he's never ever failed his purpose. The good thing about God is that he will always supply what he starts, what he initiates. Any project that he starts, he always has a supply for it. And so I have seen people come together. I have seen the kindness of my friends, and I have seen the kindness of strangers coming together for a good cause. And it has brought many, many times tears in my heart and in my eyes. And I have met some wonderful men and women out on the streets, and who have been such a blessing to me. And so we've been doing this. We go out on the streets with my daughters and my friends, and we just serve them and we love on them. And we've even served them under the bridge where they're living. Wherever they are, we'll get to them and we'll help them. Because for me, I don't want to live in this world just like a passenger or just passing by. Because I know each and every one of us has a deposit inside of us that is much greater than we are. And if we reach inside of us, and if we ask God to really draw up the inner roar in us, we'll be able to go places. And fear will no longer be a factor. There's so much darkness going on in this world. Lately, it seems to be much more. And the more the darkness, the more the light that is needed. And so we are the light, salt and light of this world. And it's so important that we get out and show love to people. For me, I always say that so long as I'm doing what God has called me to do, and so long as I'm loving on people and putting them first, I know God will take care of my other needs. I'm not a millionaire by any chance. My heart just breaks for anyone who is suffering and in need. And so my birthday is coming up in August 3rd. And I was telling God, I want to do something else. I don't want it to be about me. I never wanted it to be about me. I want it to be about someone who needs us, someone who needs us to be an answer to their prayer. And then I thought about how it would look like if my friends and everyone around the world gathered together during the month of August, and every time we leave the house, we leave with a sandwich, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or a turkey sandwich, wrapped up with so much love and purposefully looking for someone in need. One prayer that I always pray to God is, dear Lord, open my eyes to the sufferings of this world, to those who need me. Because it's so easy to go about your days and never see those who are suffering. You could pass them by you and you'll never see them because you're so focused on where you're going or what you're doing with your life. But once you pray that prayer, the bold prayer for God to open up your eyes to the sufferings of this world, you will be surprised that God will open up your eyes and you'll be able to see so much around you. So I guess this is an invitation of some sorts to you and to the whole world, that during the whole month of August, that each of us leaves the house with a sandwich of some sorts. And even if you can't buy a fruit, you can put a fruit in the bag, and that we look for someone who is in need of that sandwich, and that we deliver that sandwich to them on our way to work, on our way to church, on our way to the grocery store, wherever we are going to visit friends, wherever we're going, that we will leave the house with a bag of sandwich and show the world how we can help eliminate hunger. And that's my challenge for myself, as well as my challenge for you and the rest of the world. It's so easy to eliminate hunger if we all come together as one, and I believe we can do that. And so that is the extension that's the extension of love that I'm daring me and everyone else to dare to do much more than what we are doing right now. And so if you're in Kenya, if you're in Tanzania, if you're in the United States, if you're in London, if you're in Australia, wherever you are, join me and let us show the world how it looks like to end hunger, and how it looks like for everybody to step outside their comfort zone, because a lot of it takes boldness, and you have it in you to overcome any fear that is holding you back from being what God has created you to be. And so as you take on that challenge, take photos and share with us on Facebook, Instagram. I will leave a link on below the video where you could post your videos, and let's show the world how love looks like, because a lot of people are hurting and a lot of people are in need. And how beautiful it is that someone is going to bed asking God to answer a prayer for food the next day. And how beautiful would it be if you showed up with that sandwich and if you were the answer to that person's prayer. So I love you guys, and I hope I didn't take too much of your time. This is just me, and I know I haven't shared my whole life story, but this is just bits and pieces of who I am and how I got to where I am. And guess what? Whatever your dream is, whatever it is that God has put in your life, there's always a level of success that comes into your life where you ask yourself, now what? And if you're there, or even wherever you are, there's always an opportunity to give back. And don't let fear hold you. And don't say, I'm going to wait for X amount of money in my bank account for me to help, because trust me, if you don't do it with the little you have, you will not do it with $1 million in your bank account. So that's just a dare. For me, I have learned so much to share what I have, and so it's so easy for me now. It's a progressive growth. You start somewhere. So over time, I have learned to share my meal with those who don't have. So as I shop, I'm always conscious of how can I share this meal with someone else, or what can I do to help. And hunger is a big deal, and no one should go hungry. So let's be a part of making the world a better place. I love you guys so much, and until next time.